She's the only U.S. player in history to score in her first 5 starts with the senior team. I do think that she has to be in serious consideration for this Olympic roster. I don't know how you can keep Jaedyn Shaw home. Okay, moving on to the world of soccer. No time to waste. If you did not have enough women's sports on Friday and Sunday, guess what? Had you covered on Saturday. The SheBelieves Cup, the first round, took place on Saturday, and the U.S. are going to the final after defeating Japan 2-1, where they will play Canada, who advanced past Brazil on penalty kicks after a 1-1 draw. These games, I mean, probably if you're a fan that follows the team, these kind of feel like an ongoing part of that Gold Cup experience. A lot, obviously Canada is a team that the U.S. just played. It's a similar group to the Gold Cup. This is sort of a broad strokes look because I think this is all still just sort of putting together scouting tape for Emma Hayes when she comes to join the team in June. So let's just talk about the big picture things that happened in this game. And I think there were a lot of positives, actually. I think that this game was really productive for the U.S. And I think that's exciting because we've seen a number of productive games for the team over the course of this year so far, which is what you want when you're kind of on this short runway to a new-ish group going to an Olympics. So first, I mean, the big headline is that Jaden Shaw is very good. She scores again. She scores an equalizer after the U.S. gives a goal in the very first minute. It's kind of this audacious golazo from distance. I joked on Twitter. I was like, Jaden Shaw plays soccer like she's the only one who has the thought that maybe they should kick it into the goal. And I think that kind of ability to take those shots and be confident enough to take those shots is really, really important to this U.S. team that sometimes can get in its own head in the attack. She played in the midfield on Saturday because they moved Mallory Swanson back into the left wing, a fantastic return for Swanson, who also just looks really fit and ready to go. Very exciting. But I think that I've always actually kind of felt this way, which is that even when Shaw is brought onto the field as a left winger, she is encouraged to drift centrally. And so I think this is more now she's set centrally and encouraged to drift left. She played really well with Swanson on that left side, both of their natural movements. I mean, if you've seen Mallory Swanson play before, you know that she really prefers on the dribble to cut in. She loves to drift defenders on the top of the box to try to create separation. Shaw is kind of doing the opposite thing where she is placed centrally and she's able to drift out wide to receive service. Those two looked like a really natural fit. And she's the only U.S. player in history to score in her first 5 starts with the senior team. Just an incredible start for Jaden Shaw. Now, they do need to be careful with her. I'm not necessarily advocating for her to play 90 minutes every single game. She's a young player. Twyla Kilgore kind of underlined that in her availability today on Monday, that they're not going to rush it. They know how good she is. They know how efficient she is. She is, I mean, unless something unfortunate happens, hopefully not, I do think that she has to be in serious consideration for this Olympic roster. I don't know how you can keep Jaden Shaw home, but they are going to be methodical. I mean, I think we've seen this with injury returns as well. They were very methodical with Kat Macario with her minutes on Saturday. They're not going to try to run Shaw into the ground, hopefully, because that's a thing that the U.S. has struggled with in the past. But they know how good she is. That's basically what Kilgore said. And she unlocks things for this team that not everyone can unlock. And I'll be interested to see if she starts on Tuesday. Again, I think they're just going to be pretty cautious with making sure they're not overloading her. She's bringing something to the U.S. that we did not see in the World Cup last year. And it's hard to tell. Hindsight is 2020. Maybe she was ready for this last year. Maybe this is now the time. But there's a good argument that she right now is one of their most valuable players, and she's only just reached that senior level. I would also want to point out that the U.S., I think the mentality element was great. Again, they give up a goal in the first minute, which we'll get to in a second, kind of why that happened, because there was a structural thing that occurred that allowed that goal to happen. But because it was in that first minute, they kind of didn't panic. It was sort of so wild that Japan got that goal so early that they didn't really they didn't know if they needed to adjust. They basically were like, well, we didn't really get to implement our game plan because this game just started. So let's just keep implementing it and see what happens. And they didn't get shook. They did not back down. They were very aggressive in their attacking formation. They held a very high defensive line. They got the outside backs involved in the attack. And that allowed them to work their way back into this game. That response, again, maybe just more in a mental piece. It is that audacity for Shaw to take a long distance goal like that. But we also saw Swanson come very close to getting a goal herself. She had a couple moments in front of Japan's goal that just didn't quite land as she's sort of getting her finishing back. And then after Shaw's goal, they keep kind of on the front foot. They keep pushing. I think the penalty that Lindsey Horan scores in the second half was indicative of the U.S. kind of wearing Japan down. It wasn't always the sharp, again, it's that push pull. It wasn't always the sharpest in possession, and they did have moments where they gave up space. And like I said, I'll talk about that in a second. But it's still just what they have learned from this Gold Cup in terms of mentality with a group that feels like a veteran group at this point. It's hard to overstate just how important that's going to be, especially with the understanding that they're not going to have a ton of time with Hayes before they go to the Olympics. So a lot of positives. I think you're looking at the young players making an impact. You're looking at Mallory Swanson's return, looking fantastic, looking like she's ready to walk right back onto this team. You're talking about the mental element of coming back from a goal down to win 2-1 and kind of having that confidence almost, not a flurry of activity to chase something that didn't need to be chased in the second minute of the game, but just to implement the game plan and say, yeah, we're going to keep playing the way that we were going to, and we think we're going to beat you straight up. It worked great. That's the U.S. that we like seeing. That's the U.S. that fans like seeing, even if they don't always get the result. But that feels more like the U.S. of old from the mentality element. But that Japan goal it didn't come out of nothing. It wasn't a fluke. It came from Japan overloading the wings because they correctly scouted and identified that the U.S. likes to play with very attacking outside backs. Jenna Neiswanger was playing on the left side. She's pushed up forward. And Japan, to their credit, they are, I would say, a little bit more versatile in some of their passing patterns than maybe the Japan teams of the past. They're willing to go long. They're willing to go direct if they see that space inside. Now, it's possible that the U.S. says, that's fine. We're happy to give up space on the wings. We trust our center backs. We trust our recovery runs. It's more important for us to remain aggressive, retain that aggressive mentality, and we will deal with that defensively when it comes in. Maybe they say that, but that was an issue at the beginning of this game, which is that they play this high line, and sometimes you get burnt from a really nice goal on the wings. I don't know if this particular approach would work well against a team like Japan, or a team, well, they were missing. I felt like Japan was also, unfortunately missing June Endo, who is out with an ACL tear. She is such a good wide player for them. But I think Japan quickly identified that they were going to get space on the wings. They understood that Neiswanger is going to be really important in the attack. So they basically surpassed the wings and got their shots from outside. But like I said, that worked. It was that same approach that allowed the U.S., when they were looking for a goal, to keep pushing forward and to get that breakthrough. I still also, just on the other side, still feel like Emily Fox is doing a lot of cutting in to assist the defensive midfield, which it plugs one hole and creates another. I still don't think that the U.S. is particularly comfortable in a single defensive midfielder structure. I think that a lot of times they do have help coming in from the wings, whether it's from your wingers having to come back, or it's your outside backs having to cut in. And there is exploitable space there still. And Japan wasn't able to execute. And again, to the US's credit for putting them on their heels a little bit and making sure that the line of contention was high enough that Japan wasn't always able to get comfortable pushing into the US's attacking third. But they still haven't solved that. I think that we are still looking at a team going into maybe June games, July games, and the Olympics without that midfield structure completely figured out. Now, I do like that they're trying it. I like that they're being aggressive. But we also saw that with Vlatko Ananovsky's U.S., which was that ultimately they decided they needed to go to the double pivot because the exploitable space was being exploited, and it was hurting them in the back. So interesting tape, I think, from the United States on this one. Like I said, a lot of positives, but also some question marks still ongoing. And we're not really seeing, we're seeing the team really commit to Sam Coffey, which I think is great. I think Sam Coffey has a lot of really valuable things she brings to a midfield, particularly in ball distribution and aiding the attack. I think her positioning requires some help from teammates, which perhaps is something that the U.S. is willing to give up in order to have those other things that she can do as part of their arsenal. But I also am questioning perhaps why we're not seeing more different looks from different players come in to play that number 6 role. Because I think Sam Coffey is an incredible option, but I think for the U.S. that wants to kind of vaunt that depth, I think that they should be looking at other options as well. But all in all, I think good stuff from the United States. This was the game that I think they really wanted. I mean, this is why they scheduled it first. They really wanted to play Japan. That was a team they hadn't played in a while. Very, very good team who did quite well at the World Cup. Kudos to them for winning at home. I think they did a very nice job. Naomi Girma did have to leave the match with a thigh strain, which you never want to see, obviously, but hopefully that's not going to hold her up long term. But also, I guess, a good kind of heartening situation to see Abby Dahlkemper come in, and the defense didn't really feel like they were derailed too much. I think that's a positive for Dahlkemper, who had kind of an up and down Gold Cup. I think we always talk about how Girma is indispensable for the United States defense, and that is true, and that is why I'm very, very happy that this will hopefully not be a long-term issue. But the fact that in this moment they had to make that switch and they were able to do so, I think is a good sign for the United States defensive depth. And also, again, I think a testament to Tierna Davidson, who has continued to look really, really steady for both club and country in 2024, which is exactly what this team needs. Like I said, they'll be playing Canada on Tuesday in Columbus, Ohio. I will be there. I think this is just giving them an opportunity to actually play a soccer game versus the semifinal of the Gold Cup, which was really kind of taken over by the weather conditions. It was that really wet, sloppy game that I think both teams walked away not feeling like they really got to implement any like philosophical ideas on the pitch because they didn't have the ability to do so because of the conditions. So in a way, this is nice. I think that there's more things to learn from a rematch against Canada than maybe you might think, especially because their last meeting was not really on good. It was on equal footing, but equally bad footing. So I'm interested to see how they approach this against Canada. Would love to see Lily Johannes brought in maybe for a little bit of playing time, though I'm not sure Canada is the exact right opponent for that, just because of the way that they like to impose physicality in the midfield. But more rotations, get a different look at different like these midfielders, because I think the midfield is really in flux, especially with Shaw moving in there. You think, okay, what does this structure look like that allows for attacking freedom, but also a sturdiness that can't be exploited by other teams? So really interested to see what happens there. But yeah, a bright start to the SheBelieves Cup for the United States. They have to feel good about what they're kind of cooking up here. I think the biggest question is, how do you hone it into something that can continue to impose a style of play to control games with a final group, which we are getting closer and closer to seeing that.